You need a box org chart. Don't delude yourself. Very common.
Right.
Well, when I get bigger, I'll need a box org chart. It is keeping you small. And you're saying,
Yeah.
well, I don't have all those activities. Yes, you do. You just do it all. You, your spouse, whatever. You just run around all day, and no one can come along as you go and grow and take that box from you because
Yeah,
you've never documented what goes on to help.
exactly. Alrighty, guys. So I'm here with Al Levy. For those of you who are unfamiliar, he created the 7-power contractor system. 7 powers are planning power, operating power, financial power, marketing power, sales power, staffing power, and leadership power. And today we're going to be talking a lot about implementation. Al, as I was listening to your book, I liked what you said about how there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of things that people read online as far as what they can do to improve their business, but implementation and how you actually execute that, is sometimes more challenging than it would initially appear. So we'll be
Yeah.
diving deep into that. But before we do that, so Al exited from his family business in 2001, super successful fuel oil heating company doing 17 million in the late 90s. Exited from that to start the 7-power contract system. Can you tell us a little bit about what led to? Well, first of all, I'm curious what led you to exit, and then also kind of what inspired you to start the 7-power contractor firm.
Yeah. First, I'm going to go back a little bit. Yeah. For those who don't live in the Northeast, fuel oil is how you heat houses, a lot like propane. But I realized way back in the 90s that the government was coming for that business. Plus, also our customers loved us, and they kept asking, "Can you do plumbing? Can you do this? Can if I go to gas heat, can you service? Can you know
Hmm.
air conditioning?" And we kept saying no, no, no. And finally, I said to my brothers, I said, if we don't do it, our competition will, and we will be locked out of our customers' basement. So
Right.
we made a conscious decision. But the great news is we had figured out how to own our original business, fuel oil heating, so that I was able to reproduce. And the core of
Right.
that was operating manuals and a hands-on training center and becoming better trainers ourselves. So
Hmm.
that was already one piece of what I call the linoleum that was down, so
Hmm.
that we could then focus on others. And why do I use the word linoleum? Is because when I didn't have that much money and we had a little house, my wife and I, she wanted to put linoleum down in a kitchen pantry, and I
Uh-huh.
think it was maybe 4x4. And so I said, well, I'll do it. So I get the stuff, and then now remember, this is not days before YouTube videos,
Right.
and I pretty handy, and I just put it down, and I put all the stuff in adhesive, and I turn around to go put the other end down, and it rolls up my butt. And I turn
Oh,
around and put it back down, and then this is going on, and
all
finally,
right.
I'm in frustration. I realize I get it done, but I realized a very valuable lesson having nothing to do with linoleum. Don't do anything next if you don't have the first piece securely down.
Mm,
And
right.
so that applied to this. So then once we knew we could go into gas heating and then air conditioning and then plumbing, and ultimately we also went into electrical, and we're successful at it because we followed the things that we had already learned. Plus,
So you
just to
feel
make
like
it more interesting,
so
we
you
did
feel like putting
residential,
that
commercial, industrial, Peter, not just residential.
so you feel like the linoleum or the one side of the linoleum that you had to put down was getting those systems in place, getting those manuals in place. And did that translate pretty seamlessly to the HVAC side of things?
It
And
did. It did very much so because, if you're mechanically inclined, you can move into other trades and know it. Plus, we could also acquire companies and owner operators and things of that nature, small companies, which is a good way to step into it. There was
hmm
a, a bunch of calls instead of no calls, and not just retraining customers about it. So we had a nucleus of calls, we had some expertise, and our team was already on this training path.
hmm
What we had evolved from, and we were a New York City union shop, is that instead of hiring just industry retreads, we had mastered how to take willing apprentices with no skills
Yeah.
to willing techs with great skills. And that is a million times better.
So any service you wanted to provide, you could follow that same system and just train people up. I
Yeah.
wasn't quite sure what you meant by the call nucleus. Could you articulate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So in acquisition, when we had one main hub shop, which was our main shop, and we were on Long Island, which is 115 miles tip to tip. We also had satellite or spoke shops. And so for those shops to run right, we needed systems to be able to do
Okay.
that. And we already had learned about, otherwise you could open up a shop there. But the problem is if you drive out there and you do a call, then you have to drive all the way back. Then you drive out there and do a call and drive all the way back. So in our particular cases, if we knew our ideal customers were there, we
Hmm.
wanted to open up a spoke or satellite shop there.
Oh, okay.
Found it easier to buy a small company. A lot of times they even had a little office for us to
Hmm.
acquire as well in a real estate play, but then we could build around that. So we called it a beachhead and we would market around it. And if we could market two ends to the middle. So that made us
Okay.
much more efficient. This wasn't even the term at that time, but we knew we were losing money with all this drive time. Today, of
Right.
course, it's billable hour efficiency went way up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I remember that story from your book about the two customers that were they were arguing about who had the better company, and it ended up both being one of your guys' companies.
Yeah, that was
That's
really
funny.
about a marketing thing, which is
Yeah.
my dad and my uncle, to their credit, our service area had been wiped out for urban renewal. And
Hmm.
if they had not gone to acquire to where the customers had moved to, they would have never been a business for me and my two older brothers when we showed up. And the happy accident, we found out that strategic, well done acquisition grows calls and helps you grow people. So that was
Mm.
a two thing, and we continued that forever, and they still did it that way. And whenever we stepped into a new trade, we also continued that model at a new location.
So let's dive into here to some of the implementation stuff. Um, how important do you think it is for owners of a small, any type of small home service business? How important do you think it is for the owner to have their own blocked off time, do not disturb time, just to be able to work on the business?
Yeah, if that work on the business was a very strange concept to myself, I followed my dad's model of, work hard, hopefully the money will follow. And more times than
Mhm.
not that it did, but it was very, very chaotic.
Was he
And
more of
my
just like dated like super like he was like a ninja at like responding to things
Yeah,
and that's
he
why?
was, go out, sell a lot, and work really hard and the money will follow. This was the kind of goal. And
Okay. Gotcha.
this is before the term budgeting was even something I learned about. I didn't learn
Sure.
about that till the 1990s. So to be clear, to back up for a minute, our company was started in 1936 out of my grandfather's gas station.
Oh
So
wow.
we were around a long time before we did any of this
Yeah.
stuff. So by the early 90s, I had realized, that it was really chaotic. And what I describe it for those who can't see me, but I'm 50 pounds lighter today than I was then. So to say I was eating my stress would be quite the understatement.
Right, right.
And I am not alone in this. Well, whatever your addiction, alcohol, drugs, whatever
Sure, yeah.
thing, there's a lot of ways that we cope with that. And a lot of it goes back to the stress of it.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
my friends, my industry friends, Ellen Rohr, who's a very famous, we actually worked a lot together, co-franchise partners and the rest of it. But, she said to me, as did Dan Holohan, who was an industry giant as well, you know what, you're on a collision course. It's not going to go well. And I was still young at the time. And
Hmm.
they said, you got to read this book. And I go, what book is that? They go, Michael Gerber's E-Myth.
Hmm.
And I read
Yeah.
Michael Gerber's E-Myth back in the 90s.
Good
What's
book.
delightful to me is it has a brand new life today. It is absolutely on fire again because guys like Ken Goodrich from Goodell, which is the largest HVAC company out there, these guys are all locked into it. And basically, what I took away from his book that I never really understood is if you're always working in the business and never on it, nothing was going to change. So for the first time, I realized why things weren't working because I felt I was a pretty smart guy.
Hmm.
I had even gone to school for engineering degree. And by the way, when I went for my engineering degree, 6 months of a year, I was still driving a truck. So, and I never practiced a day in the field as an engineer, but it was very helpful for a lot of different reasons. But point of it is, I really felt that there were 7 million things I had to do right.
Mm.
And both contractors probably feel exactly the same way.
I
I
mean
don't,
that's how I feel. A different business, but exact same type of feeling.
yeah. And I worked with, we had a vendor that was doing SEO for us, probably about a decade ago. It
Hmm.
was really new. and they were just chaotic. So my
Yeah.
partners sent me down to go fix his company. And now, I had never done SEO myself. I was pretty technologically savvy. I was really during the first computers. I learned how to program. I knew a lot, not enough that you'd let me near doing your SEO. And I'm sitting with their team, and I said, well, how do you repeat this? Oh, we have a 19-page checklist. And I turned to the owners. I go, did you know that? And the owners go, no, we had no idea. So I said, well, that's good news and bad news. And they go, the good news is you have a checklist.
Yeah.
Bad news is it's 19 pages and no one is going to go through the 19 pages because you just made it so overly complicated. Let's go back to E-Methods. Why did things not work? And then what it was I needed was systems, documented systems. And he gave some great illustrations about that. And I said, I want to be like that hotel he was talking about. And that's what it took the impetus of creating, the manuals and things that I knew that we didn't have. Because the way we ran our company is the way most people do. Whether you're small or large, don't be confused that everything's going to be great once they become big. No, it won't.
Right. Yeah.
It's just going to be more gasoline to a fire. And I know that from working with companies from 1 million to 200 million. So you've got to get these systems in place if you want to do this in a less stressful, more successful way.
Yeah. And I think the challenge that a lot of people have, I was part of a business group called Convene, really cool business group for Christian business owners, and I was talking to some of the guys in there, and the question came up like, how important is it to block off time? And so one of them, or what I think the guy that was leading it asked, what's the advantage of not blocking out time, of just being open? And then one of the other guys responded, well, the advantage is like you can be there for your team, and they're going to have questions, and like there's a certain extent of like, you got to be there for your team to help navigate and put out fires and stuff like that. But like, um, I guess my question is like, how does someone manage, like, because put it like blocking out that time to start creating those systems and stuff, I feel like is pretty crucial. But like, how does somebody go about doing that? What's a healthy amount of time to block off, and how does somebody even determine that? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, today I don't do one-to-one consulting anymore. Once I put my programs online, one of the first programs is Signature Operating Manual Systems, which is the org chart you need and the manuals that cover the boxes on the org chart. Because if you don't train them up to own their box, here's what's going to happen to your life. People used to ask me, I don't know where my day goes. I go, well, I know where your day goes.
Hmm.
People knocking on your door going, hey, got a minute, got a minute, got a minute. And now they can text you, Slack you, every other way in the world all day long. And you're mad at them, but it's really your fault. And I had to learn that same hard lesson. I was
Yeah.
angry at them, but I never gave them the tools. So they had to come to me. And as I talk about in my book, it's even sneakier than you think. Because first I had to identify why hadn't I given them the tools? And the reason was the three things I talk about in the book is I was addicted to being a rescuer, a guru, and a fireman. And what I mean by a rescuer is like, I grew up on those Westerns, where the cavalry rides in.
Hmm.
And I like that. So, I
Yeah, it's a good fit.
love coming
You
into
feel
this.
useful. You feel validated for all your experience you've gained and stuff. For that phrase you said, owning their box. Can you articulate on that a little bit?
Yeah.
What does that
So
mean?
the box or chart are all the boxes. It's not to blow up your ego. It's not the C-suite, CIO, CTO,
Right.
CFO, CEO. It's none of those. It's the boxes it takes to run your business and the reporting order. And if you're like what we were, is we had changed our dynamic back in the 90s. When I told my brothers I was sick of being a hostage to my staff, and I said, we have all these industry retreads. What we should do is take young, willing apprentices with no skills and get them to willing techs with great skills. And they liked the idea. But
Hmm.
none of it could happen until we had an org chart, which think of it as a bingo board,
Hmm.
and then showing the career ladder. And then with the bingo board, how do you cover each of those boxes? And that takes an operating manual, which is basically a playbook. And it covers 80% of what goes on, not the 20% weird. You're
Yeah.
not chasing after perfection. And perfection will undo you. And chasing the 20% weird will undo you. But here's the problem. Most of us as owners rose to the top because we were the last stop. We were the guys who would get it done. We were the perfectionists and we knew
Yeah.
everything. And that is good and bad because that's not what they are. They're not your clone. No one on your team is going to be their
Yeah.
clone. What I told my brother Richie after an exhausting day at work, we were the last two guys standing in the office at 2 a.m. And he's moaning about why don't they do this and why don't they do this? And finally, I just look at him and go, hey, Richie, if they could do all that, why would they be here working for us rather than down the road in their own truck,
Yeah, exactly.
their own business?
If someone has your skill set, they're
Yeah.
probably going to be starting their own business, or I don't know, at least wanting to get paid.
Yeah, want to move
Their
up
hand.
the ladder, which we didn't have the
Yeah.
ability to do until we defined it all. But the birth of the org chart, I was telling Peter before it came on here, I'd love to think that I had it all figured out. The answer is I
Mhm.
did. But what was happening was the story that I always share, which is my brother Marty, who never handled the tools, he was the financial guy and was in charge of the office, which was a blessing because my brother Richie and I didn't want any part of that. And
Mhm.
so he would be the first guy in around 6 a.m. And he feels a call from one of our customers. There was no heat from the night before where somebody had been there. And he comes across the hallway and starts screaming and yelling at the service manager. And when I show up at 6:30, my first job of the day is to walk the service manager off the roof before they jump. And then a short while after,
When you just to clarify, walk off the roof, you mean
jump while yeah,
quit
I don't
quitting?
literally get them from like quitting,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Yeah. And so I was handling, as I always did at 6:30, I would take the first look at the dispatch board, try to organize things, who's in, who's not out, all of that stuff. Even though we were a good sized company, we were 70 people at this point.
Hmm.
And so just setting people up for success. Anyway, the phone rings and it's a supplier. And just for background here, my dad told myself and my brothers when we were young, you pay the vendors before you get paid because if push comes to shove, they'll take care of you. And by the way, he was brilliantly accurate because when
Hmm.
Hurricane Sandy devastated Long Island, which is our market, we lost 20 trucks. Enterprise
Wow.
took care of us. We needed all this equipment. They filled us up to the brim, with all the stuff. The point of it is, he says to me, the vendor is, hey, Al, you guys are usually great about bills. This may just slip through the cracks. When do you think you can take care of it? And so I hang up the phone and I race across the office to the accounts payable person and I just rip into them. And now
Hmm.
Marty's job is to walk them off the roof before they jump. So we're standing between the two offices, right in the middle of our office. And I'm going, hey, Marty, if you don't like the way the service is done, you tell me and I'll get it handled. And he goes, well, if you don't like the way the bills are paid, you come see me and I'll take care of it.
Hmm.
And then we just looked at each other and go, this is really good. We ought to sit down and write something about this. And so
Right.
that was the birth of the org chart. And it was
Gotcha.
really a lot of good reasons for it. One of the biggest expenses we had was truck expenses. We had a huge fleet,
Hmm.
especially big oil truck, but just, service vehicles and install vehicles. And
Yeah.
basically, I would go get insurance bids. Richie would get three insurance bids, and Marty would get three insurance bids. Can you understand how stupid and ineffective that was? Finally, we said, "Oh, you know what, Marty? It's in your box. You go get the bids, and then make a presentation to me and
Yeah.
Richie."
Yeah, for sure. So like the boxes, what for a company that's like has that stuff structured well, right? Um, where each employee owns their box. What does that look like on a day-to-day basis? Like, what should that employee know going into work? How does that employee start their day? How does that employee finish their day? What
Yeah.
does what does owning your box look like in a practical day-to-day sense?
The manuals and the associated training, you can't put everything in a manual. The manuals and associated training should prepare them for the 80% that goes on day in, day
Mm,
out, and not the 20% weird. That's
okay.
really what they're designed to do for those boxes. And it is very typical, even though you see all those boxes, you go, well, I don't have all those people. Well, guess what? I've worked with $50 million companies and they don't have a person for each box. It's very common.
Yeah.
There's a save as to that, which creates the depth chart. And if anybody's watched a football game or played a football game, if the center gets hurt, somebody else snaps the ball because they're cross trained. So the point of this is it doesn't matter what size company you are today. You need a box org chart. Don't delude yourself. Well, when I get bigger, I'll need a box org chart. It is keeping you small. And you're saying,
Yeah.
well, I don't have all those activities. Yes, you do. You just do it all. You, your
You
spouse,
do it.
you just run around all day, and no one can come along as you go and grow and take that box from you because
Yeah,
you've never documented what goes on to know.
exactly.
And basically, it's not taking you out of the picture, it's moving your name down. So I was the second best tech out of 25. Ultimately, when I trained we did all the other systems that came along,
Hmm.
I was really like the 24th or 25th tech.
Well. So the 80/20, so I'm familiar with that concept. I think I read it initially in Tommy Mello's book, Home Service Millionaire, and he probably learned it from you. And I
He,
don't know.
he, he
So
did.
the 80, so just for people not familiar with that, can you kind of explain that and why that's important?
Yeah, so you need to list all the tasks that go on, or all the jobs you have, or the calls, or the activities that go to the box, and you have to go, well, is this just outside the norm, or is this something that needs to be done? So there's creep on this. So when
Yeah.
I did a electrical manual before I was in electrical with my one of my first customers, he actually talked me into going to work for him, and I go, well, I haven't done electrical. I know electrical because I've been in HVAC, and you can't do it without knowing it. He goes, Al, I've seen everything you have. I need 25 pages for an electrical manual. And that's almost exactly what it came out to be. We wrote
Wow.
25 pages to do that. And basically, I sit down with the service manager. He goes, we have 2,500 electrical tasks just for circuit breakers. And I go, no, you don't. You have a 15 amp, a 20 amp, a 30 amp. It's still a
Hmm.
circuit breaker. And then you
Right.
have a federal, a Pacific, so this is where you start going after the 20 weird. You follow?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of that's just one example of what I'm speaking to.
Yeah, because like so I started hiring a couple people recently, and we're a pretty small company, so we went from 2 people to 5 people. But even in that, what I noticed is that I tend to go after that 20% weird. Like I want everything so that everybody's prepared for any possible situation. And then what I found is like these new people started and they just all these other random questions came up. So I feel like to a certain extent, like there is still that, especially for a smaller company like mine, there is still that like level of responding to just the weird things that come up and kind of knowing that that's going to happen and then being really good at communication. You know what I
That
mean?
is not what kills your day.
Right.
Let me be clear. What kills the day is I used to do this in seminars, so I'll just do it here.
Yeah, please.
So
I get the seminar for free.
yeah, you get the seminar treatment. So it's just like you know, I tell you need shoe covers, and I explain why you need shoe covers to protect the customer's floor.
Sure.
And then you come in the next day and go, "Hey, Al, got a minute? I heard what you said yesterday. Shoe covers are really important. Where do I go get them?" And I give you the
Mm,
answer.
right.
Next day, you're at my door going, "Al, I'm sorry. I have to confess, I wasn't listening because I had a fight with my wife. Where do I get my shoe covers?" And you can see, like the next day, my dog bit me. And I
Yeah.
just keep giving them the same answer because
Yeah.
your staff is trained to play question person because you
Mm,
have been trained to be the answer person. And as long
right.
as you let that exist, but here's what you need to say: is this something that should be in the manual? So
Right.
in the
Yeah.
manuals is how you get dressed. And I take pictures, which is objective evidence. And all I do is wait till you, Peter, come waltzing through the door. There's meatball sauce on your shirt, your buttons,
Hmm.
your shirt's out of your belt, you're wearing sneakers, whatever it is. And I just hold up a picture and go, how do you look like this?
Right.
And then, so that this becomes objective. And when I get your truck set up to the model design and I take pictures of you in the truck, and now I
Hmm.
poke my head and the truck is a disaster, I
Right.
go, how does your truck look like this?
Right. Yeah. So it's
That's
kind
what
of the,
it's really about, getting the 80% nailed, which totally changes your company.
I like that picture too because it's more like you could spend hours, right, writing a manual on like all the little things you need to do to clean your truck and which little, but like just having that picture, like this is the result that it should look like, right? And
Well,
people
I have pictures of
they'll figure it
everything,
out.
yes, and I actually, even mundane things like we had a 40-foot trailer for, the metal products coming back. We had different dumpsters for different materials and things. And they just felt free to dump anything anywhere they wanted. And we had a 40-foot trailer. And if you don't
Hmm.
know, Peter, the people are going to dump it in the first 5 feet of that trailer, and 35 feet is now useless. So
Hmm.
when you arrive, and this goes to staffing, recruiting, hiring, orienting, training, retaining, 5 steps of staffing. In your orientation, we go through with a checklist to the dumpsters, which are all named, and we show you which way to, how to do what and what goes in there, and you initial off, not check it, you initial. Because here's your last chance to ask me about it, because now I'm going to go out to the yard periodically and find out, are they following these things? And if not, why not?
100%. So for as a business owner, like there, I feel like there's a certain amount of hours that you can work productively. But if you are, yeah, if you're burnt out, you might think adding more hours might, is going to help you get further. But your mental energy is gone, your physical energy is gone, and so there's kind of like it's useless at that point. What do you feel like is a good, let's say like an early bit, let's say one that's closer in size to mine, right? 5, 10 employees, something like that. At that stage, like, what do you feel like is a good work-life balance for for contractors?
Well, I actually include a time management course in the first program, Signature Operating Manual System, because
Okay.
that really did change my life. Here's the sad part of it. It's maybe will take you 1 to 2 hours to go through that program, and we have tracking on it.
Hmm.
People who have bought it and complained about time management, only 10% ever go through the 1 to 2 hour course to change their time management
Ooh.
because they don't feel they have the time. So this is the classic,
Yeah.
I come across you in the forest. You're sweating profusely because you're chopping down trees with a dull axe. And I go, Peter, you got to come with me. We'll go back and sharpen the axe so you can
Yeah.
chop down trees more efficiently. Go, Al, I would come with you, except I'm busy chopping down trees
Yeah.
with this dull
Yep.
axe. So a couple of things without giving away the whole thing. Time management basically starts with taking control of your calendar. And today, typically Outlook, Google Calendar, whatever. But basically, the calendar has both your personal and your business, because if you have two separate calendars, you will miss your kids' soccer games and there's no
Hmm.
time. And you have to build things in time block. I talk about 2 hour undisturbed time block.
Yeah.
If you're not going to dedicate a minimum of 1 2 hour block where you are working on the business, I will help you out. Nothing much is changing. You have to have a 1 2 hour block. I actually, when I first went from the one-to-one consulting and I wanted to prove the concept, I brought a couple of workshops together of
Hmm.
people to go through the workshop. And I had great success with 12 people. Typically, 10 of them would do really great. 1 or 2 would have a problem, but I would check in on them. And one really good, he had owned some of my products before that and he just couldn't get it done. So I called him up. I go, what's going on? And he goes, well, I really mean to do it, but they have a question, they have an answer, and it's something they know to reach out to me. And I go out and bring all of them together and say, I am working on what's going to change this company for now
Hmm.
and forever. And these systems are critical to helping customers, the company, and yourself.
Yeah.
There's really nothing more important. So literally, unless the building's on fire, don't disturb this time.
Yeah. 100%. And do you think like it would help business owners to kind of block out like, okay, this is my time. This is my you can disturb me in this time to kind of like help manage. And this is my absolutely do not disturb time type of thing. Do you feel like something like that would be a good
I
way
would
to look
say
at
that,
it?
yeah, of that I prioritize with the 1 2 hour block. And they don't need to know what you're doing personally, but you can mark out for personal. And also, who do they have to go through as a screener to get to call you? So my brother
Yeah.
Richie gave out his phone number to everybody. And I said, Richie, it ceases everybody's using you and bypassing the system. It doesn't work. and we were already
Yeah.
7,000 customers. So I took away his phone, and
Yeah.
it made it that only that number would ring to the, before this was a virtual assistant, to screen these calls. And Richie had already told him which group of calls could then come through to him.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, he'll get a lot of calls from people like me talking
Yeah.
about marketing. It eats up
Or,
time. It eats up
yeah.
time.
Or, but more, even customers,
Yeah.
the fact that you own a nail salon doesn't put you at the top of my list of a guy who owns 50 apartment buildings we serve.
Mm. Yeah. No, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Yeah, because it can be you can get into this mode where like if you're just in like response mode, reaction mode, how can I respond, react quickly to everybody? I think that keeps you from prioritizing things that are really important.
Let me share a point here, this because this was me. Is I was a firefighter. Remember, I said rescue a fire and I didn't quite go through the rest of it, but I was busy putting out fires all day. So if you're always in firefighting mode, how do you ever get into fire prevention mode? And the answer is that you have to make a conscious decision to do that.
Mm,
Putting systems in place, putting training in place, all of it on the front end, or you're going to be fighting fires. And some of them are going to get so big that you'll never be able to put them out.
yeah,
And if you're not careful, it'll put you over the cliff.
yeah,
So for instance, if you don't have a mystery shopper program where you find out where your guys are not doing the ethical thing, much better for you to find out than a news TV station doing a sting, which will put you out of business.
yeah, yeah. I actually watched one of those recently,
Yeah,
and
they're really good at reporting the bad ones, not so good about the ones that do. But mystery shopping and ride-alongs, these are all key things. But if you haven't trained them up, what are you going to do in mystery shopping and ride-along? Because they're not trained.
Mhm.
Goes back to the org chart, the manuals, training, and then in the case of techs, is taking the manuals, building the right hands-on training center, which is all in staffing power, signature staffing systems, and then a training curriculum and becoming a better trainer yourself. I never woke up one day and said, you know what I would love to do? I'd like to be a trainer. No,
Mhm.
I didn't want to be that. But ultimately, I had to take control of it. I had to become a better trainer because the only way I could control the training is 80% of it came from us. If I was relying on others, I couldn't control what was being trained. The problem with trainers we knew really early on when Richie and I were talking about this is we had gone to a lot of training. There are some trainers who are really great and know their subject. The bad news is they're so boring and dull, you'll be asleep.
Mhm.
So unless you
Yeah,
can learn in your sleep, you're not going to be very good. And then there's others who are very charismatic, engaging, and funny. But heaven forbid anybody ask a question of any depth, it's quick that they don't know what you're talking about.
right. Yeah,
And so you have a better chance of controlling that. It's a skill, like all skills. And that's
hmm,
what goes into staffing systems.
right. So, the we've established like how important it is to work on stuff in the business. Um, and with as people, get on your program and look at the seven powers and stuff like that, um, what kind of fears do contractors have? Like, sometimes things like this kind of seem obvious, right? That it should get done or that things should be implemented. Um, what are some of the fears that hold people back from working on and implementing a system like this in their business?
I'm going to ask you to remind me of this because I just want to kind of back up to a little bit here, which is I thought I had it bad in the old days because I would go to, conventions and there were nowhere near as many conventions and events as there are today. So you need to do what my brother Richie and I did, which was every January we plotted out where we were going, and otherwise we'd never be in our office, and that was a problem. So that's number one. Number two is you need to know who can you follow, because the problem is today, if you're on the internet and Facebook groups, social media, there's no shortage of consulting people type
There's a
out
lot
there.
of information out there.
It's a lot of information. It's not a lack of information. The problem that has existed since the internet came along, and now, of course, even more so in social media age, is
Yeah.
how do you know you're listening to a guru or an idiot? And that is part of the problem. But what I was sharing with Peter before is the best way that I know is not so much what they're saying, But
Hmm.
who are the testimonials from people that are like me? They're in my business or the business that's similar to mine or similar size group who are saying, you know what? Al's the guy you got to follow when it comes down to manual, it comes to staffing, it comes to planning, you know, and it turned our company around. That's what you need to use to do that.
Hmm.
And so it's not so much about the channels, it's kind of doing that.
Yeah.
So once
And
you know
I
that you
think,
have ideas and actions, it comes down to projects and habits.
yeah.
And so in the book, I talk about, which is a good fast read. It was designed to be 2 to 4 hours. Trust me, I have 10 times more content than that. I
Yeah.
wrote it very short for a reason.
You
Because when
took
I
that
worked with my
top
editor,
10%,
yeah,
top
I worked,
10%.
yeah, I worked with my editor to tell her, I've got 10 times as much content as this, and we're not putting it in this book because guys are like me. We don't have a lot of time.
Hmm.
I want it to be able to be read in 2 hours, but I want them to go back over it again and again with the yellow highlighter and
Yeah.
then actually do something with the information.
Yeah.
So it's a good primer. And so you get the whole 30,000 foot overview of stuff as to what you need for a foundation under your company. And the reason I'm coming back to this is planning power is where everything goes in the right direction. So where do you park all these ideas and things that you do? They go to the top of the funnel into what I call the master project list, and they work their way down using two strainers: fix biggest problem or challenge, greatest chance to grow and be profitable, and you arrive at a top 30. Top 30 is what you would do in a year. You
Hmm.
can't work on 30 projects now. I don't care how big you
Yeah.
are, how many people you have, just chaos. So you use the same strainers again: fix biggest problem, challenge, greatest chance to grow, and get down to your top 5. And then here's the secret thing: you have said to yourself, and preferably to your company as well, these 5 projects habits will have the biggest impact.
Hmm.
So you need 1 2 hour block at a minimum where you're making those 5 come alive.
Yeah.
That's really how you don't get whipsawed. Because every new idea, basically what happens to most of us, and I am guilty as well, is I walk in the office and I go, Peter, I know I told you this was vital yesterday, but this just arrived. I learned it on a podcast. We got to do this
Yeah.
today.
We gotta do AI calling
Yeah, we have
and
to implement full-blown AI. And we don't understand it. We don't realize it's delusional. AI is going to be a phenomenal tool. By the way, AI is really just another term. From the day that we stopped using MapQuest and
yeah.
went to Garmin, AI has been around, and it's going to continue to get better and better.
Yeah.
Like barcode scanning. You guys will have to be old enough to realize you had a barcode scan 15 times one item. It was so bad. Today,
Yeah.
it freaks us out when something isn't read the first time.
I think FOMO is a real danger because there are clear, like sometimes like the clear steps that you need to take are the most obvious and a lot of times they're the most boring. And it takes discipline to sit down and work on your top, 5 projects when there's all this like this new system and this new system and this new AI calling and
Yeah.
here's why you need to get, and so like, oh
I
my
don't need the box charts and the org chart. I'm just going to ask AI to write an SOP and SOP. And what is an SOP
yeah.
versus an operating manual? An SOP is a checklist, which is good in the absence of nothing. But if you just have SOPs, then you have like little post-it notes all over the wall.
Well,
They're
what's the
not a
difference?
replacement.
Help me understand, because what's the difference between an SOP and an operating manual?
Yeah, this is what I'm explaining. SOP is a checklist. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, like that. And so that's what you're
Right.
creating. But it isn't all of what it takes for me to own my box. That's the
Mm,
problem. The task I do and the steps to do it, that's much more like a playbook. Like how would I be the center on the team? How would I be the quarterback on the team? They each have a playbook.
mm, okay.
SOPs are checklists. And if they're not contained to anything, they're basically random post-it notes all over the place. That's the big difference between operating manuals and SOPs.
So an operating manual is more of like talking about like for things that have a lot of variety to them. Like, hey, sometimes this thing will come up or this thing, and here's how to kind of
Yeah,
deal
it's
with
more
those.
much more of a me talking to you. It's a
Mm,
conversational thing,
okay.
not just like a cookbook with random.
Yeah.
All you have in a cookbook is just recipes, and you
Yeah.
never learn how to cook.
Yeah. And that totally makes sense. Because if all you did was SOPs, like there would be maybe hundreds of them.
Yeah,
So,
thousands of them. And the other
yeah.
thing, because you're going to think you need all of these things, Then if they're not trained on them, they're pretty useless. And people will also say, well, I don't even need manuals. I'm just going to have videos. So imagine yourself crawling through an attic to an air conditioner that's not working. Should
Hmm.
I pop up my phone now and learn how to read how to fix this thing? Yeah.
Right.
And it's just this, and it also, by the way, the attic's 150 degrees. It's really
Do you guys have attics
stupid.
in Arizona?
Very little.
Okay, good.
Almost everything, most buildings are typically one floor
Okay.
because of the heat.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of challenges, like when
Getting back,
contractors
I
are,
wanted to get back to the employee thing is your fear and
yeah,
stuff. Everybody thinks, well, if we, they've always had free reign. If we have manuals and systems and things that we have to hold them accountable, they'll all quit. The answer is not likely. And
mm,
number one is if you haven't expressed the WIFM, which is what it's in it for me, to them, yeah, they're not buying in on any of it. So
yeah,
WIFMs are both. What do I get if I do? What happens if I don't? And then has to
yeah,
be clear about that. Also, if they quit, more times than not, they already had their foot out the door. You just didn't know it. And
yeah,
they're not the type of players you want. So getting committed to that, yes, while you're here, this benefits the customer, this benefits the company, and this benefits for you. And we're going to build a career path for you so
mhm,
that you can continue to go and grow your career as big as you want right here.
yeah,
That's what we did.
yeah. Because and I think like I do think that's super important to help the team understand the why of what you're doing,
Yeah.
not just the what. I feel like it would be tempting for a business owner who is very like, they just want to get things done now, like to take the manual, slap it on the desk. All right, this is how we're doing things. And for employees who, especially if you haven't implemented something like that in your company before, it can feel very jarring. You can feel like you're being like squished into this box versus, hey, here's this responsibility for you, and here's why we're doing it, and here's how it's going to help. I think
There's
there's
a
a
lot to this. I'm kind of going to get into the top is when
yeah.
you're doing this in the program that's online, it's how to tweak it, not rewrite it, how to get it rolled out, how to get buy-in, how to keep it in the culture, because you
Mhm.
can't just do it and expect it to stay there. It's like pushing a rock up a hill. As soon as you
Yeah.
let go, it's going to come on back. And that's where the right kind of meetings, this is where they get their fingerprints on how they do the work. Ask yourself, how did a New York City union shop buy into all of this? And the answer is they hated thinking they did a good job. And one of the four Levies or their managers showed up and go, that's not what I wanted. Based on
Right.
what? Our individual opinions. It was all subjective. They hated it.
Yeah.
And they wanted to know how do I move ahead? And you can't move ahead because you're trapped because we don't know that you've earned this box. So how can you own the next box?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And you have the now is would that be in the staffing power
Yeah, so
signature staffing
it
system?
starts. Yeah, it starts with the org charts and manuals because you can't get going until you have that.
Okay.
And then the second program leverages the manuals into the being able to take your manuals and build the right hands-on training center because there is a right hands-on training center.
Okay.
How do I know that? I built the wrong one originally. Richie and I and my were sitting in a we were young men at the time, and the guy on the stage is telling us that the average age of the tech is trending to 50 years old. And we were maybe
Mm,
25 or 30 at the time, and we freaked out. So we got busy and built a hands-on training center, and I trained them up. And invariably, they'd be out in the field a year or two, and my brother Richie would call me up and go, "Didn't you show them motor rotation?" I said, "Of course I did." And then the next time he'd ask another question about, something that they didn't do right. And go, finally, I said, "Richie, they're out of the training for a year or two. They have nothing to lean on." And that
right.
caused them to back up and write the manuals as well. Another reason for it.
Yeah.
And once we did, and we looked at our training center, we realized we built it all wrong because the manuals inform you as to what needs to get built in the training center
Yeah.
so that you can check them off for those tasks right in your house, not coming to my house and teaching them on my job while you're
Mhm.
billing me. We used to call it, you know, OTJT because we didn't want to say it out loud. It's on the job training. So it's very hit and miss. I understand small guys think, well, that's the only way I can train them. It's not true. You can go to your own house. I used to do before I had a training center, all these things. My wife used to play customer with them all day. I had the cleanest
That's
heating
cool.
system ever.
That's really cool. Yeah, and I think like like those operating manuals and checklists, like um, I have ADHD, so I forget stuff all the time. So as we started implementing some of this stuff in our own business, I noticed that it was helping me, right? And I've been doing what I've been doing for 7 years. So like, yeah, if a technician, even if they're a really good technician, there's so much knowledge, there's so many complicated things to learn that I feel like it to assume they're just going to retain it, especially as technology changes and stuff like that. I think that's not a wise assumption.
The basics are the basics. They don't change. So the technician chapter, which is the longest one, is what do they need to know from the time they wake up to the time they go to bed, other than the work you do? Because that's where a lot of the mistakes happen right there.
Can you articulate on that a little
Yeah,
bit?
how to get dressed, how to show up, what are the meetings, what do I have to do, who do I respond to, how do I work with the dispatcher? All of that
Hmm.
is in their tech
So like
manual. That's
the
just one manual.
communication, the dynamic of like how they interact with the customer and the team
Yeah,
and how they fit into the
yeah. It's
overall
not.
puzzle.
There's a lot of how to operate the truck safely. There's a lot of things you don't think about, and then one day you just walk out and go, "Hey, your tire has low air pressure." Well, where does it say to check that?
Right.
And
Yeah.
heaven forbid they get in an accident with low tire pressure. Now you have a bigger problem. So there's a lot of the things that you may have thought of or may not have thought of. A lot of that is covered in the tech manual, but they're not going to
Mhm.
retain it because every week they go to a meeting. There's a meeting where
Yeah.
they get up and read 1 to 2 pages after it's been rolled out. And then we just ask them a simple question. Do you have a better, cheaper, faster way to do this? And if
Mm,
so, we will talk about it. And if not, okay, this is how we do it. Let's move on.
right. Yeah.
So
100%.
they like being able to get their fingerprints. They're not allowed to hijack it, but they do get their fingerprints in it. That's where the buy-in, and that's what keeps it in the culture of the company.
Have you found some good ideas come out of that question?
Oh yeah,
For
it happened in my company. I always felt, as the owner, that I had to have a solution for every problem. So we were 24/7, 365 shop. We did residential, commercial, industrial, as I mentioned. And so we had our own people answering the phone throughout the whole day. And we had
Mhm.
shifts from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., 8 to 5, 10 to 7, 2 to 11, and dead of winter, 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. was staffed, not on call. People were staffed. And so the 2 a.m. guy would run a call, and there were a whole bunch of circulators. And they would tell the guy at the terminal that I told him we'd be back at 9 o'clock. The message got messed up. I'd walk in at 6:30 and I'd look at it and go, "What? What is this? I can't understand this." And now I had to wake up the guy who just got to bed at probably 3 o'clock in the morning. So we're in a meeting talking about how to better handle this. And this is
Mhm.
ancient, by the way, so bear with me.
All right.
He said to me, we could have a dedicated phone line and a dedicated answering machine. And here's what I will do. When I finish my call, I will say, I was at Mrs. Smith's house, 123 Main Street. It's the third circulator on the right, which I left a red tag. That's the one they're expecting, and they're expecting us between
Mm,
9 and 11 tomorrow. Good night. And we all just did, wow, because none of us had thought of this.
right. Yeah.
And so it becomes delightful when your team is helping you problem solve as you
Absolutely.
go.
Yeah, and I think you were talking about how that creates buy-in. I think that for the team, getting to voice those ideas, even if they don't end up getting implemented, even if they're not better, faster, and cheaper than the current process, getting to voice those ideas, and then from time to time, when there's a good idea, implementing that, yeah, they feel like they're part of something, they're involved, they have an influence on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I do, there's a 23 video lessons, and then there's a 57-page PDF workbook, which is like an install exit checklist. So it's not like here are the things, just go have a good time.
Yeah.
So there's a method to this. But
Yeah.
one of the things I talk about is when they talk, you take the notes about whatever they're making a recommendation, and don't answer in the moment. You don't need a knee jerk. Tell them, okay, next week I'll be back with an answer, and they're entitled to 3 answers. By the way, this is more global. Yes, we can. I changed it. yes, but not now, and here's why. And no, here's why. Be
Hmm.
careful how often you say no. Because if you're saying no all the time, it's like raising a kid that you say no, 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 no. After a while,
Right.
they don't hear it. So be
Right.
judicious in the no. Also, you have to be judicious in the yes, because if you're saying yes to everything, it becomes nonstop. So there's a
Yeah.
little bit of
Sometimes there's
orchestrating.
like, especially like if you're a conscientious leader and you want to, you want your team's contributions to be valued. Like it can be tempting sometimes to say yes too fast. When you're talking to them in the moment. So I love
Yeah.
that process of waiting a week.
Yeah. Write it
Um,
down so they know they've been heard.
yeah.
I always talk about this to this day, by the way, it still goes. I don't care if you do it on a tablet or whatever you do. If I ask a question and you start talking and I don't write, that's going to be problems because it
Hmm.
goes back to sales 101. Whose words are more important in a sale? My words or the customer's words?
Right. The customers.
Yeah. So, and how do I prove I'm listening or that you can trust me? Is I'm
Writing
writing.
down.
So this is a very big part of that concept.
Love that. Yeah. And in a lot of ways, like employees, um, the way you handle and the way you hire it should be a lot like how you would sell a new customer. The way create like you have the product that you sell to customers, but you were talking about the career, not a job, but you have the career that you sell to employees, and then they pay you in labor and you pay them in money.
Well,
Um, yeah.
in the staffing bar, which we finally got to, which is the 5 steps: always recruiting, always hiring, always orienting, always training. And here's the step all owners miss: we assume they're on the team forever until they walk out. And
Mm,
the last step is always retaining. Now, if you do a great job in the first 4 steps and can offer a career, your retaining chances go way up.
right.
So in the recruiting, we literally built that in as our pitch. Are you sick of just having a job? Do you want to work, with
Mm,
and
love
build
that.
a career? It was all geared to that. So we were already recruiting those people. And so that was part of it. And then in the hiring process, we used to just hire in desperation. So let's spend a
Yeah.
moment talking about this. Is My brothers and I were not born enlightened. We fell in a lot of holes and go, wow, that hurts. Let's not do that anymore. So
School of
one of
Hard
the
Knocks.
holes, yeah. So one of the holes I was telling Peter before this is I gave my brothers 3 years notice that I was leaving because I wasn't going to leave them stranded. I was hiring new people to make sure, and I was really testing out the systems before I would test it
Yeah.
out on where I was going. Having said that, think about you who are listening. Are you lucky you get 2 weeks notice? Maybe you get 1 week.
Mm,
Maybe they just leave the keys in the truck and then you have to figure
right.
out whether they are or not on board. And so this recruiting, hiring, and so we would hire out of desperation. My brother called it, Marty, the one in the office, one day said, how we hire is really the mirror test.
Mm,
I didn't know. So I just bit. I go, what does that mean? He goes, we're so desperate at that point that if they can fog the mirror, we'll hire them. And so this is why I say it's always recruiting. Even if you don't
mhm,
have a need, we had more calls than you could normally do. And we just said to ourselves, if 2 great guys just walked through the door, or two, especially it became easier when we were looking for apprentices that were
mhm.
willing, instead of trying to find lightning in a bottle, a willing tech with great skills. It's
Yeah.
very difficult to do. And even if you do, you have to overpay them to come to you until somebody overpays them more than you and they move on. So
Right.
this
Yeah.
is a better path. The point of it is that being proactive and always recruiting and always hiring and always orienting and having a structured one, 5 or
Hmm.
10 day orientation sets them up for success. Let me tell you how important orientation is. I wish I could say, we started to get better at it, but I was still not like, oh, have this totally nailed.
Right.
Turns out, as luck would have it, one of my first customers in Pennsylvania, and,
Cool.
not the one I was talking about before, he
Right.
was great company. And he goes, I love that you have this orientation system locked down. I go, thanks. He goes, orientation is super important, probably the most important thing. I go, well,
Mhm.
that's kind of a big statement. He goes, oh, no, it's not. Think about it when you were in junior high school or middle school. You were a big fish in a little pond. And all of a sudden you go to high school and now you're a little fish in a very big pond. You go, wouldn't it be nice to have a big brother, big sister? And so what I have learned, this is him. He goes, the better I orient them in their first 2 weeks dictates the success they have for the rest of the time they're within the company, which is really monstrous.
Why does that first couple of weeks have such a big impact?
Because it gets them, they're already, what happens when somebody comes to your company, yeah, this is a great opportunity. And when they get there, they're disconnected from what it is. And it's kind of like, not getting too biblical, is you spend 40 years in the desert, slavery doesn't quite look as bad. So the point of it is, no matter what they didn't like before, all of a sudden they're disconnected. They've left their friends and people they work with. It's easy to have buyer's remorse. And orientation is that, okay, I made a good decision. I'm feeling powerful. I can do this.
Yeah.
I'm empowered to do this. I know the rules of the game. And I'm on my way to building the career I came here for.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Like you have a whole, whatever job you had in the past, even if it sucked, you had a little ecosystem there of people
Exactly.
and stuff like that. So yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yep.
Um,
But that takes
so,
systems. That's what they're
so
getting oriented on. Yep.
speaking of the having those good, willing, employees that are eager to learn and stuff like that. How would you as a business owner, like how would you set up a dream job for them? What would that look like? What would be super attractive to people who are high performers, are hardworking, and just, awesome people to be around? Like, how would you create that dream career path for them?
So for us, it was once we defined the org chart and what it meant to own these boxes, we had on the service and the install wing is apprentice, junior, senior, field supervisor, and then different wings where they could always go and grow. And I always did the interviews, and I had a very small office for myself, my two brothers, and my dad. And even when we moved to a nice place out of the hellhole that we were living in before, because our area went under urban renewal, we never grew the office because my father's mandate is we don't make any money with you sitting here, go out and do something. So we didn't sit in the corner office very much. And it wasn't like, for our ego.
Mm-hmm.
The point of it was that, is we really made sure that we were focused on their career. And what I love is a quick story. One of my great partners in the franchise, when I worked with him back in 2005, he told me, I love everything you do. This was Zoom Drain. They were out of Philly. And it was him and his brother. And he had come out of the U.S. Air Force, and he already knew about systems. And he looked at me the first day and he goes, we don't fly planes just winging it. We have manuals and ways to do stuff. And he goes, that's what I want for my company. And he goes, just so you know, I'm going to want to franchise with this. So I just kind of turned my head slowly, left to right. And I go, how about if we get them dressed right today? Number one. Number two, let's get their truck straightened out. And just, kept on rolling through it and I go, and it was 2005. We finished our work in 2007 and they're in a great place at this point.
Beautiful.
Ellen Rohr, who I worked with a lot, is
How did you meet Ellen, by the way?
I met Ellen in 1994.
Okay.
C2000, which was the forerunner to Nexstar, which is like one of the great affinity groups for plumbing, heating, cooling, electrical companies.
Right.
And she had been there very early, and then I joined her in that organization. So we became fast friends, very different. But she was, gravitated toward the financial and coaching, things of that nature. And I did planning, operations, staffing, sales, and marketing. Okay. So one day when we're working together on a seminar, I'm there with my writer, who we did workshops with, and we're doing this workshop we call the Al and L Show. She's on stage talking about budgeting and financials and rewarding, with money and the rest of the stuff. And I turned to this person that I've been working with, Kim, and I said, step outside for me a minute. We go outside and I turn to Kim and go, oh my God, I just realized I could do a successful surgery and the patient would die if they don't know what Ellen does. And so that's when Ellen and I started to work together. We never worked in, like that. We were always separate independent contractors,
Mhm.
but we came to work with a lot of companies like Tommy and so many more. And
Yeah.
frankly, I'm very pleased to say they went on to sell for generational money and things of that nature. And
Beautiful.
some of them just kept on continuing to this day, going and growing. But what
Awesome.
she taught them is what I call financial power in the book, is basically, we all have done the game is disguise our voice and call our, competitors about what they're charging. And of course, that's illegal if you don't know.
Right,
So
right.
that number one, don't say Al said, you really have to do a budget. That's what I learned even back then in the 90s. We had never done a budget. We were stupid. Like I mentioned before, we'd buy a motor for $30, paid the guy $30. We sold it for 100. We figured there was $40 of pure profit. We never thought about the trucks, the building, all the other indirect costs of a job. And that only gets figured out when doing a budget. So my very first budget that I did with my brother Richie was when we were stepping into gas heating, plumbing, and air conditioning. The first time it comes out to $150 an hour, and we freaked out. So Richie says, do it again. So I do it again, and it comes out to $150 an hour. And pretty soon I just, did the first toilet, and I think it came out to like $400. And I looked at Richie and I go, well, here's the good news. Not everybody's our customer. We have more calls from customers. People, we have to now deliver, we have to be uniformed. Trucks
Mhm.
need clean, criminal background,
Yeah.
drug tested, things that we never really did. You've got a million reasons. And also I told them there are going to be 3 customers that are going to be calling us, and they will be the biggest problem. Our
Mhm.
family, our friends, and our house of worship
Mm,
or house of worships, because we served all across the scheme, churches
right.
and everything. So we had to be prepared. When you would call, I go, thank you for the opportunity. Just so you know, we may be higher than some, and you're entitled to know
Yep.
we're criminal background. We're trained in our house, not your house.
Mhm.
We have manuals. We have things like that. We will
Yep.
look at the whole job so we don't miss anything. We will cover everything so there's no damage to anything that's there. We will tell you what the price is before we go so you can make an informed decision. Do expert job. We'll show you that everything was left clean. And if there's a problem, we're coming back with a smile on our face to make it right. And our
Absolutely.
warranties are better than anybody else.
Love that. Yeah, and you have to budget correctly. You have to charge correctly in
Yeah.
order to do that.
And the best way to
Um,
describe what budgeting Ellen talks about, by the way, her books are still relevant today. Where did the
which
money
books would
go?
you recommend from Ellen?
Yeah, Roar, by the way, is spelled Rohr. Ellen Roar.
Yep.
And on Amazon, it's Where Did the Money Go is the first book to read.
Where did the money go? Okay.
And when you finish that, her second book is How Much Should I Charge? So it's in
Got it.
sequence.
So for a contractor, a lot of guys, yeah, a lot of, so this is basically the same story that repeats itself. Technician, works for a company, doesn't like how that company does business or that company treats them unfairly in some capacity. They have the HVAC skills. They say, oh, I can go do this on my own. They go start their own company, and running a business is a whole different skill set than than just being a technician. And so, like, I think I love in your book how, when you were talking about kind of like what your options are, right? Closing up shop and finding a good company to work for is a very valid option, and I think people need to know that and need to recognize that that's a valid option. Because if there's a good company you can work for that does have the business stuff down and they can pay you well, you're set. But I guess what I would ask you is, for someone who's kind of in that rat race, right, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do next. When do you think it's a good idea to like, okay, I can't sustain this, got to close up shop, versus to just power through it?
Yeah, so I still offer a free 30-minute today as my give back since the day I left my company 22 years ago, because I have suffered and I had mentors come into my life, and I
Mm,
never forget that without them, this old guy would be in a basement turning wrenches at 2 a.m. Having said that, that's I'm happy to do that and these programs help. But
Mhm.
that ultimately, I can teach you how to dig. I can show you where to dig, but you got to pick up the shovel. So Ellen was much better at this because she used to hear the sob stories and go, "Oh, this has got to work. It's got to work." And she would be nice but firm. She goes, "No, it does not. It does not." And that's part of the problem, Peter, is that, it was my dad's business, I'm third generation, and everybody will be let down if I don't succeed, and this failure is
Mhm.
the problem, and it's all fair. So what she would challenge them to do is, okay, let's do a 1 year budget. Let's do a
Mhm.
3 year budget. And then you have to put on your calendar that it either is in 1 year or 3 years this, or you're going to
Mhm.
have to close up shop and go find yourself a job or move and go
Yep.
do something else because
Yep.
you can't. We, and then when I lived in the Northeast, because you and I were talking about that when I lived in New York, one of the first things we teach our drivers in drivers training at the company was when you're stuck in a snowbank, take your foot off the accelerator because you're just digging a deeper hole. And that's still the same thing with you is, just plowing money into it and going deeper and deeper in debt doesn't hurt. In free
Mhm.
30s, one of the things I always ask is, when they, oh, it's not this, I go, okay, I just got an easy question. Is there more money coming into your business than going out? So if they tell me it is, I go, well, you already win. Now, could it be
Mhm.
easier? Could you scale it? Can you go away for a month? Those are other questions. But if you're
Right.
losing, what do you have to do? And what I usually recommend is, make a column of everything you need and then separate that column into what you must have and like to have. And then you have to make some hard choices because you got to put a
Yep.
tourniquet. When you're bleeding profusely, a tourniquet can save your life. But if you leave a
Right.
tourniquet in, you're going to gangrene, lose a limb,
Yep.
or worse yet, die. So tourniquet is not a permanent solution here. Those are the things that I would say as far as it. Be aware your company, people at your company will think the same thing is, well, where's my career here? I'm going to go.
Right.
And the
Yep.
reason I talk about this so much is I was probably 30, 35. I was going to do another no heat call. And for some reason, it struck me. If I wasn't the boss's kid, what would I be thinking? And it immediately hit me. I'll buy a white truck. I'll sell for $5 less. I'm going to be rich.
Right.
And if you weren't the owners out there, that's exactly what you would be thinking. So
Yep.
if you can't offer a career, and what we said to our field supervisors when they got to that is you make
Mhm.
money off the people that you make better by going
Yep.
above goal. You're creating that money, which we're happy to share. And you don't have all these headaches in business of, making the phone ring and accounts payable, receivable, and all these other things that you have to do.
Love it. Good stuff, man. Yeah, so I mean, you heard it there, folks. If you are in that place of, trying to figure out what to do, you can sit down with Al for 30 minutes. And I know he's a real intimidating guy, and I know he's pretty scary. So if that's too scary for you, you can grab his book, which is
Uh,
actually right behind me, Seven Power.
Reading the book is probably a really good way to start. It's a paperback, it's an ebook, and it's Audible. Any one of those three
Yeah,
will work.
I had to do the audio version. I have pretty bad ADHD, so I can't sit down and read something. But listening to it was yeah, it was really good. So that's how I did it. And you have the on your website, you have the so the signature operating manual system, you have the signature staffing system. Can you break down the different programs that are available and
Yeah, so
uh,
there's the book on there which takes you out to Amazon. That's where you buy what you want. And then the very first program is Signature Operating Manual Systems. That's where these org charts I was talking about, the box org chart, how to create the depth chart, and then a thing called the flow of communication. And then how do you cover each of the boxes? All the manuals are there, and you can tour it all. It's all made to look at. Um,
perfect?
it's also knowing that there's a lot more in the program behind it, which is the 23 videos and the 57-page workbook. And there's three, 30-minute sessions within the first 6 months to use for support. Um, that sets you up. If that's all you want, great. If you want to do what I'm talking about, building your own willing apprentices into willing techs, then you go on to the second separate program, Signature Staffing System, which are the 5 steps of recruiting, hiring, orienting, training, retaining, but also how to take the manuals and then training curriculum and how to build a right training center. There's a lot of examples about how to do that as well.
Awesome, beautiful. Hey man, well I've really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like I've taken things that are applicable for my business as well. So I appreciate being willing to come on. And yeah, guys, I'm gonna link to all the resources below. And yeah, thanks again, Al. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate the opportunity.